Access Bill, third reading. Infrastructure, amendments relating to Utilities Access Bill, third reading. New Zealand Railways Corporation Amendment Bill, third reading. Affordable Housing Enabling Territorial Authorities Act Repeal Bill, third reading.
Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, I move that the Utilities Access Bill, the Infrastructure Amendments relating to Utilities Access Bill, the New Zealand Railways Corporation Amendment Bill and the Affordable Housing Enabling Territorial Authorities Act Repeal Bill be now read a third time. Mr Speaker, these four bills formally comprise the Infrastructure Bill, represent a significant step forward in facilitating infrastructure. These bills cover three areas. The first and second improve the arrangements for managing access by utility operators such as electricity, gas, telecoms and water operators to road and rail corridors. Current arrangements are inconsistent across utilities, which creates uncertainty and disputes and inefficiencies, leading to higher costs for operators and local authorities. The third part amends the New Zealand Railways Corporation Act to remove some of the statutory restrictions that affect the running of the Railways Corporation's business and to bring the entity's governance arrangements more in line with the Crown Entities Act. This is directly relevant to the ongoing operation of Kiwi Rail. And the fourth area is a repeal of the Affordable Housing Enabling Territorial Authorities Act 2008, retaining an amended prohibition on restrictive covenants affecting social housing. Mr Speaker, the Utilities Access Bill establishes a framework for a national code of practice that governs how utility operators and corridor managers coordinate their activities. To enable industry participants to develop and take ownership of the code, the bill allows anyone to prepare a code, but the code must meet certain requirements before I, as responsible minister, can approve it. The code must have broad agreement between stakeholders and must include operational and dispute resolution processes. A code approved by the minister under this legislation will be deemed a regulation. The approach the bill takes is that there is no requirement for a code, but if industry participants see value in having a code, one can be developed. The Infrastructure Amendments relating to Utilities Access Bill amends the Telecoms Act, the Electricity Act, the Gas Act and the Local Government Act. This is to provide for consistent provisions across the Acts around reasonable conditions of access to corridors, allocation of costs when utility operators are required to move assets, and time periods for notification and response. The Government has a particular interest in the passage of this bill as it contemplates the rollout of broadband around the country. Amendments to the Railways Act and the Government Roading Powers Act provide timeframes for responding to requests for access to rail corridors and motorways and require corridor managers to publish criteria on which they will base decisions to grant access. The New Zealand Railways Corporation Amendment Bill brings many of its provisions in line with the Crown Entities Act. The changes proposed in the bill include normalising the appointment and dismissal of directors, changing to a simple majority the number of directors who can call a meeting, and probably and the power to appoint a deputy chairperson, and streamlining arrangements for changes to the Railways Corporation's capital. Probably the most important of the changes suggested, given the need for Kiwi Rail to access considerable capital and the Government's commitment to provide some of it. The bill also removes the limit on how much the Railways Corporation can expend in 1 year and permits Railways Corporation to effect insurance cover for a director or employee. It brings the corporation's ability to grant easements and impose conditions on the rail corridor more in line with the powers of other companies. The Affordable Housing Enabling Territorial Authorities Act Repeal Bill removes a potential impairment to increasing the housing supply, which we believe is a vital issue in determining housing affordability. At the same time, it retains an amended prohibition on restrictive covenants affecting social housing. The original Act was intended to provide local authorities with regulatory tools to address problems of housing affordability. In fact, Local Government New Zealand and territorial authorities who made submissions on the bill suggested that rather than improving affordability, it would increase the cost of housing in the current market. The building sector also raised concerns about increased complexities and delays as a result of the Act. That is why we are repealing it. Moves to encourage the building of new housing need to ensure that regulatory and other costs are contained, opportunities for increases in supply are enhanced, and a repeal will assist in this regard. It will also be assisted by the government's thorough review of the Building Act and the recent change in building consent processes, which by some estimates will reduce the cost of a mid-priced house by around $20,000. This bill provides for a modified version of the prohibition relating to certain restrictive covenants will be included as an amendment to the Property Law Act. This addresses growing concern at the use of covenants when the new subdivisions are set up to exclude social housing, which unfairly discriminate against some of our most vulnerable people. Mr Speaker, the Transport and Industrial Relations Committee received submissions from a wide range of organisations interested in this bill. The majority of the submissions focused on the proposed changes to arrangements for access to transport corridors. Most submissions were very supportive of the aims of what are now the first two bills and offered constructive suggestions. The provisions of these two bills were accordingly amended. Current utility operators have no right of access to the rail corridor. The amendments to the Railways Act in this legislation recognise that the corridor is underutilised and that the current amendments do not go far enough to enabling greater use of the rail corridor by utilities. In summary, Mr Speaker, these four bills will contribute to a smoother pathway for infrastructure development in New Zealand. They address a number of issues relating to enhancing infrastructure investment, enabling better operation of the rail infrastructure, and taking a step in the direction of cleaning up the regulatory tangle that's preventing the development of affordable housing. I'd like to thank those who've been involved in developing this legislation, including the support of the opposition and work that they began while they were in government. I think recognising the same problem, that in a country where the investment of infrastructure was picking up, we needed to take the opportunity to clear up some of the regulatory fog that our local bodies, our government agencies and our infrastructure businesses have been working in. This bill has had constructive consideration both in the committee and in the House, and there is cross-party support for the first three bills, although I recognise there isn't cross-party support for the bill related to affordable housing, and that is really just reflects a difference of view where the previous government believes that legislating for affordable housing might work. The evidence all pushed in the opposite direction. Housing affordability is gradually on the improve, but it is going to take a number of further changes in the regulatory environment to ensure that affordable housing does become again something that's within the reach of those who are on the average pay in New Zealand. Mr Speaker, I commend these four bills to the House.
The question is the motion be agreed to. Speaker.